Let's do it. Let's add a custom mob to Minecraft. New topics added to the Forge and Fabric courses, such as tameable and rideable entities, projectiles, throwable projectiles, and boats, as well as first steps to biomes and dimensions. Courses linked in the description below. Alright, we found ourselves back in Intelligence More, and in this tutorial, we're going to be adding a custom mob to Minecraft over here with Forge. Now, this is once again very important. This is for version 120.1, as 120.2 comes with all sorts of crazy changes in Forge. So I highly recommend you stay with this version and you don't update over here. That is a very important thing. And when it comes to the entity or mob itself, well, we're going to be adding this really cool Rhino over here. This blockbench file will be available to you. If you want to make your own entity, you can do that. I have a series, I believe that it's still on GeckoLib, but the same idea applies. Basically, you need blockbench over here. You want to make a custom entity. And because of the new system, we even have the animate tab right here. That is being, you can add that if you add the following plugin. You want to install the animated Java over here, and I believe the animation to Java converter. So these two plugins are essential for this. And then, well, you can have something like this, right? So this is going to be an idle animation. So the animations I made myself while the entire model was made by someone else. So do keep that in mind. And yeah, we even have an attack animation right here. We also have a sitting animation, which, you know, that's not really needed right now, but the attack animation is going to be one thing that we're going to tackle in the next tutorial. For now, we're just going to implement the idle as well as the walking animation. It's quite subtle, but, you know, it's enough, I think, to basically show that the Rhino is walking. And yeah, let's basically do that. So when you have a blockbench file over here, right? So we want to export a few things. And the first thing to export is basically we want to go to File and then go to Export. And then here we can see we can export the Java entity. That's going to export into a Java file. It doesn't really matter what we call it. I'm just going to call it rhinomodel.java over here. There you go. We're going to save that. The next thing we want to do is we want to go to File, Export, and then Export Animations to Java. And in this case, we are in the Mojang mappings. That's all right. Confirm. And this is a text file. That's going to be fine. This is going to be the Rhino animations. There you go. We also want to get the texture over here. That's actually quite important. So you want to right click on that, Save As. And rhino.png is fine. And those are actually all of the three things that we're going to need. We need the animation, we need the model, that's going to be the Java file, and we also need the texture. And now we can proceed once again in IntelliJ over here, and now we get to coding the thing. So coding the thing is, it's not actually that bad. So first of all, in our tutorial mod package, we're going to make an entity package. And inside of there, we're going to make a new class called the mod entities class. So this is going to be the class that is, of course, responsible for actually registering our entity. And inside of this entity package, we're going to make a couple more packages because, well, we're just going to need those. The first one is going to be the animations. Then we're also going to have client. And we will also have, just because I like to do that, a custom one where all of the actual classes go, not the custo, but the custom. There you go. And there we go. So in the custom package, I'm going to make the Rhino entity class. There you go. And we can also, in the client, already make a couple of other classes. That's going to be the mod model layers class. So I'm basically just creating all of the classes. We also want the Rhino renderer. That's quite important. And in the animations, we can make the mod animation definitions class. And I believe that this is everything that we were going to need. The other thing, the Rhino model, we can actually copy over. So that's going to be the Java file that we've exported. We're just going to copy this over. Now this is going to be, well, as you can clearly see, it's going to have a whole host of errors. Don't worry at all. What we basically want to do is the following. First of all, you can see here that the class name is basically always the name that the blockbench file had, right? So for some reason, somewhere in the blockbench file, it is called rhino-vanilla. So I'm just going to change the name here to Rhino model. This will make it so that the name of the file matches now the name of the class right here. And we want to do the same thing right here in the public constructor. That's very important. So this is going to be the Rhino model. And all of a sudden, that's going to be the first step. The second step is basically go to all of the red words and make sure to import the correct things. So in this case, of course, the entity is from net Minecraft world entity. We want to import the model over here. The model layer, interestingly enough, we actually wanted to delete that because we're going to be doing that in the other class. The model part, similar thing. Alt and enter to import, Alt and enter to import, and you basically go through each of those and Alt and enter import on all of the different classes that are not actually added just yet. Cube deformation. You just continue to go similar down here, the post stack as well as the vertex consumer. And once everything is imported, in theory, everything should be fine and you should have no more errors present. Now there is, however, a thing, and we want to change that thing, and that is right now we're just using an entity model. However, we want to extend this from a hierarchical model. Reason being is because then making the animations, setting up the animations is much easier and I think just possible at all. So we then hover over this, implement the methods, that is the root method, and that is as easy as just returning the Rhino field over here. That is as easy as doing that. I also want to get the head, so that's going to be a private final model part. I'm going to call this the head right here, and inside of the constructor, I'm just going to say this.head is equal to the rhino.getChild body, and then we're going to get the child of that, which is going to be the torso, and then we're going to get the child of that, and that is going to be the head. Now you might ask yourself, how did I know that this is the way to go? Well, if we once again go back to our Blockbench file, right, you can see the first group right here is the rhino, and then we get the body, and then we get the torso, and under the torso we have the head, and this is the head. And in theory, if I move the entire group of the head, you can see this is exactly the group that I want to have happen, that I want to move. For example, if the rhino turns its head, right, you can see it turns its entire head instead of, like, you know, just the ears, for example. We will be coming back to this, which is a reason why I'm going to make a deliberate error right here, just so that I'm not going to forget that we actually need to still set up the animations. We're going to do that in a moment because we actually need a few things for those in the actual entity. This is once again one of those tutorials where we'll go through the same classes multiple times because that's just how it's going to be, sadly, but that is okay. And now we can actually do the actual rhino itself. So there's going to be the rhino entity class right here, which will extend the animal class, and that is basically everything we need. So we're going to implement the getBreedOffspring method, and we're going to hover over this again, create constructor matching super, making sure we make this public. That's extremely important, right? So don't forget that. And then we can, well, basically add a few different things. So in theory, the entity itself is already done. Now, the first thing I want to basically, well, not necessarily caution you against, but sort of explain to you is what you can do in the animal. For example, you can middle mouse button click and you can see everything that the animal class has, right? Like, once again, you can go into the vanilla classes, and it is so extremely important that you do this to understand how, you know, entities work, how they work together and stuff like that. So what I can basically suggest to you is you click on the animal, you press Ctrl H, right? And you can go up all the way to animal. You can press Ctrl H again. And if I expand this, you can see these are all of the entities, like all of the mobs and all of the like abstract entities, right? So you also have things like the fireball or the dragon fireball and things like that. But everything here is basically available to you if you go into the living entity, right? That is basically all of the different mobs that you are familiar with, right? A ghast, a phantom, you know, different monsters, blazes, spiders, you have zombies, you have different types of zombies. Like, I cannot recommend enough going through these classes to try and understand, okay, as a Minecraft player, hey, I know how like a chicken behaves, stuff like that. Go in there and take a look at it. You might be like, oh, that is craziness. Like, there's so much stuff in here, right? But that goes back to, once again, having some Java knowledge, feeling confident that you understand what this means, because entities get quite complicated quite quickly, and that is why basically one of the best things to take a look at are, well, vanilla entities, and with those you can already make, I mean, almost anything from vanilla. Once again, if you have enough Java knowledge, that should suffice to basically recreate a lot of stuff. Right, for an entity, we also need two things that are very, very important. The first thing is a public static attribute supplier.builder, and that's going to be the create attributes. This is extremely important. We definitely need this. And this is going to return animal.create living attributes. And then we're going to add some attributes to it. So for example, we can say attributes.max health. And the max health for the elephant or for the rhino, for example, could be 20D, for example, right? Or we can then also add another one, which would be the attributes.movement speed. And that might be 0.25D, right? Something like that. And then we can add the attributes armor toughness, for example, which makes kind of a lot of sense for a rhino, right? That had like armor toughness. And we could also add some attributes.armor attack knockback, for example, maybe 0.5. And you can see there are quite a few attributes that you can basically add over here. Highly recommended to check those out. Let's also add the damage, maybe 2 or something like that. And there we go. We're going to deal with the attributes in a moment, but that is a very, very important thing, and you cannot forget to add the attributes. Otherwise, spawning your entity is not going to work. And the other thing we want is we want to override the register goals method, and that is that's a rabbit hole that could probably fill like a 8-hour lecture, because the goals are basically the AI of this particular entity. So in this case, we have a goal selector. So we say this.goalSelector.addGoal, and we can add them with a different priority. The lower the number of the priority, basically the sooner it is being executed. So 0 would be before 1, before 2, and so on and so forth. The first thing you should do is always put in a float goal, because otherwise when your entity is in water, it's just going to sink to the bottom and drown, which is definitely not something you want. So highly recommended to basically always put that at the very top over here, and then we can add some other goals as well. So for example, we can add the goal. This would be a new breed goal, for example, right? Breed goal with this, and then a speed modifier. Maybe they're like pretty eager to breed, so you can put in a 1.5 over here. And of course, this is going to be a 1 priority. There you go. And we can duplicate this. So just on the same line, Control D to duplicate it. And then we can, for example, have a tempt goal, which is something that a lot of people might want. And that would be after the speed modifier, you can put in an ingredient. So for example, ingredient.of, and we can say items.cooked beef, for example, and then can scare is false. So as you can see, basically, we can lure a rhino now with a cooked beef. So that would be the way that you can get that to follow you. So for example, just copying the breed goal over, we have quite a few other goals. So I'm just going to add a few. This is the follow parent goal, which is basically going to have the offspring or the baby is going to follow the parent, which makes a lot of sense as well. We have the water avoid random stroll goal. So there are quite a few crazy ones. We also have, and this was actually pretty freaking neat, this is the look at player goal, which is going to have a second parameter, which is player.class. There you go. And this is the look distance actually in, let's do maybe 3F, yeah. And then lastly, we can also add, for example, the random look around goal. There you go, which only is going to be this. Awesome. Right, so this would be basically the normal registering of goals. Highly recommend, once again, you can look at the, well, different register goals. So for example, the polar bear, these are the polar bear goals. I cannot recommend enough looking at the goals. You can even middle mouse button click on the goal. You can see that the goal class is here, Control H, and all of a sudden you can see every single goal that exists in vanilla. So if you're like, well, I basically want this to work exactly like XYZ entity, you have everything available to you. I cannot recommend enough looking at the vanilla things, right? If you're like, I basically want an entity that it works exactly like a ghast, take a look at the ghast class. It is as easy as that. And yes, Java for that is necessary, but that is just how it's going to be. So these are basically the two major things that we want to have, right? The goals to actually make the entity do something, and then the attributes. Just to be sure, I'm not sure if we definitely need this, but I'm just going to add the follow range right here of 24D, just because I'm pretty sure that maybe the follow range is needed for, you know, following the parent. I just want to make sure that that is added there. Sometimes there's a little bit of weirdness with the attributes, but there you go. So that is the first pass here in the entity. We're just going to make a deliberate error right here in the get breed offspring. We're going to go back to the entity in just a second anyway, but now we can register it. So to register it in the mod entities class, we're going to say public static final deferred register of type entity type of type question mark. This is going to be the entity underscore types equal to a deferred register.create forge registries.entity types tutorial mod.mod id. You know, nothing crazy at this point, should be fairly self-explanatory. A public static void register method with an I event bus, call event bus, and we're going to call entity types.register, passing in the event bus right here. And let's immediately call this in the tutorial mod class over here. Here we go, mod entities.register, and then passing in the mod event bus. And now to registering the actual entity. This is a public static final or registry object of type entity type of type rhino entity. And it's going to be the rhino equal to entity types.register. The first name, the first parameter is the rhino, the name, and then a supplier of entity type dot builder dot of, passing in rhino entity ::new comma mob category dot, and this would be the, let's do creature after the first closing parentheses dot sized, and here we can give a size. I'm going to put in a 2.5f and a 2.5f. So the size right here is going to be the actual hitbox of the rhino, and then a build and passing in the rhino right here. And no errors should be present in theory, and that is going to be the rhino registered. Awesome. And now we can actually also refer to this rhino over here, which makes us able to, well, create an offspring, for example. So this would be the thing that we need to call in order to spawn a baby. So this would be, if we were to breed the rhinos over here, that would be done right here. So for example, we could say mod entities dot rhino dot get dot create and then passing in p level, and that is going to create an offspring. And to know what item you have to have for the offspring, you can just override the isFood method. And then let's, for example, the cooked beef over here. Let's just like use the cooked beef, right? So basically we can just say if the stack that we're using is items.cooked beef. So basically we can lure them with cooked beef. And also if we right click and Rhino with cooked beef, then we can basically breed it. I don't think this is quite accurate in nature. I mean, I'm pretty sure that they probably might actually eat cooked beef, but you probably should not give them that. I'm just saying. Right, and round we go, because now we're moving to the model layers. Now, the model layers is a special kind of class, let's say. Basically, we're just going to have a reference right here to a model layer location. I'm going to call this the Rhino_layer, and this is equal to a new model layer location. This is a new resource location, tutorial_mod.modID, and then this is going to be the Rhino_layer, and then the layer here, you can do main, or I think you can almost call it whatever you would like. There you go. This is after the first closing parenthesis. There you go. So that is basically how this is set up. Now, why do we need this? Well, basically the layers are more or less sort of a combination of a texture on the model, let's say. Like that's a very, like, it's a very crude way of explaining it, but that is sort of what the layer is. You can have multiple layers, so then you can have multiple different models added together, for example, as well. In our case, we only have one model, we only have one layer. We're not going to get too complicated with this, but both the model as well as a couple of other things need to be registered with an event. Now, this is extremely important again, because sadly, almost all of it is extremely important. We cannot do this in the mod events class. We have to make a new class for this. And this is going to be the mod event bus events. So we haven't talked about events in detail. We're not going to do in this tutorial series. However, there are two different types of events. In theory, there are 4 different types of events, but let's just think about it like this. These events, right, are Forge events. Let's say if I middle mouse button click on this, it usually says Minecraft Forge event bus. That means that it is a Forge event, and that if you add the event bus subscriber over here, that's it. On the Modbus events, you want to do add mod, event bus subscriber, similar mod ID, right? Tutorial mod ID. But then you want to say bus is equal to the Modbus right here. You can see there's Forge and then there's the Modbus. And that is basically all that there is different for it. You can discover which events are there. I'm going to show this. So this is going to be the register layers. This is the register layer definitions event, called event. And we're just going to call event.register layer definitions, model layers.rhino layer, and then rhino model.create body layer. Actually, it's : and then without that, there you go. And of course, also add subscribe event. Extremely important that we don't forget that. Now you might say, well, how do I know that there's an event that is the Modbus or not the Modbus? You middle mouse button click on the event. You can see this extends the entity renderers event. And the entity renderers event, you can see it implements the iModBus event, which basically means, hey, this is a Modbus event, so this needs the Modbus right here. That's pretty much all that there is to it. Now we can even actually go a step further, and that is when you look at it, it says that it only fires on the logical client, right? So that pretty much means that you can even, in the event bus over here, we can even add a value right here, and the value here would be this.client, because this should only ever be on the client. So there you go. So that's going to be fine. And you know what? Then we can actually rename this to the mod event bus client events, because we're going to have another one which actually will need to be the mod event bus events over here. So let's just create another class. I know that this is quite crazy over here, but that is sadly how it's going to be. The other one in this case does not have the client. This is going to have this one. This is going to be normal, and that is going to be the attributes. This is going to be public static void register attributes, and this is the entity attribute creation event. Very important that we choose the right one. Event.put mod entities.rhino.get, and then a rhino entity.create attributes.build. And once again, let's not forget the add subscribe event, otherwise this is not going to function. And there you go. So those are the 2 new classes. Now, as always, of course, all of the code is available to you in the description below. So we have the model layers. We basically have the model now registered properly, and we can now move on to the renderer. So the renderer is basically, well, how this is being rendered. So this will extends the mob renderer of type Rhino entity, of type Rhino model, there you go, of type Rhino entity. Now, this is not a crazy thing, then I don't know what is, but we can just hover over this, implement the get texture location method, create a constructor matching super. And for the constructor, you just want to leave the first parameter. You want to just delete the second and the third. And here you just want to say new Rhino model, passing in pcontext.bakeLayer. We now can use the model layers that we've just created and that we've just registered with the Rhino layer. And then here for the shadow, we can just do like a 2 shadow radius, and that's going to be okay. For the texture location, we can just return a new resource location. That's going to be tutorial mod.modID and then textures/entity/rhino.png. And there we go. And we can also add this. This is the Rhino PNG that we have exported from Blockbench, of course. So this is going to be under the entity, and then that's going to be the Rhino PNG. There you go. This is, of course, also going to be available to you. And now one very interesting thing, and that is the render method. So we can override the render method, make sure that the super is still being called here at the bottom. And then what we can do is we can size this up differently. So for example, we can say if pentity.isBaby, we can say, you know what? Now I actually want this to be, well, differently sized. So we can say scale it down to, let's say, like 50% its normal size. Make sure to scale it in 50% in all X, Y, and Z directions. Otherwise, you're going to have a very, very strange baby. With the renderer done, we can now connect the renderer and the model, because you can see the renderer right now is not used anywhere. And this is being done in the tutorial mod class down here in the client mod events. Now, in theory, you can add this FML client setup event also to the Modbus right here, but let's not get too technical over here. Let's just add it here, and then we're gonna should be fine. This is gonna be the entity renderers dot register, passing in mod entities dot rhino dot get, and then the Rhino renderer : new. No errors should be present. If there are any, make sure that it is public, and make sure that the Rhino renderer only has the context here in the constructor. Otherwise, you have forgotten to delete the other 2 parameters. Right, let's just make sure that there is no error in the model here just for a second. And in theory, now our Rhino is added to the game, and it should work without an issue. And I think we're going to try it right now. So this is going to be an entity that has some goals over here, but it's not going to have any animations. We're going to add the animations in just a moment. Let's just, first of all, try it out and see if it works, and then we can proceed. All right, here we are in Minecraft, and let's just summon the new entity. That's going to be tutorial mod.rhino, and we'll see. And there we go. We have the Rhino added over here. That is pretty freaking awesome. Now you can see, well, it's like so static. It looks crazy, right? And you can see it's just moving along, but it does work. And if I get some cooked beef, you can even see that if we get some, this is actually called a steak. I don't know why in the game it's called that, but there you go. We can even get him to follow us. And if we get 2 of them, we can right-click them, and there we go. And they're gonna mate, and there we go, a baby Rhino. Now, of course, you can clearly see that. Well, I mean, right now, there is no... it looks very, very strange without any animations. So that is definitely not something you want. But there you go. That is going to be the entity added. And now let's add the animations, as well as just a couple of other things that might be of interest to you. But the other things that might be of interest to you, first and foremost, are going to be the different sounds for your entity. And to basically do that, you can just type in sound inside of the class, and you can see there are so many different methods that you can override. You can override the get ambient sound, the death sound, the hurt sound, the drinking sound, swimming. I mean, there's so many different things that you can override over here. We're just going to override the ambient sound right here. We're also going to override the hurt sound, just because why not? This is the get hurt sound, very important. And then here, we also can get the death sound. There you go. And then, so for example, for the ambient sound, we're going to say sound events dot toggle in ambient. I feel like makes the most sense. For the hurt sound, we can, for example, say sound events dot ravager hurt, right? And then for the death sound, maybe we're going to do something crazy like the dolphin death sound, because why the frick not? We can do whatever we want. And of course, yes, you can also add your own sound events right here. Absolutely, right? So that is also possible. I just, for basically showing this once here, I just wanted to use those. And now onto the animations, which is really going to spice up the actual entity. And the animations are going to be done as follows. So where do I have the animations from? Well, once again, if I actually look in here and I expand everything, we should be able to find the one thing that has some, well, that has some pretty new animations, and that is the camel. So you can see there are animation states over here that are used, and if I middle mouse button click on this, you can even see where they're used. They're used in the model as well. So basically, most of the stuff I just have from the camel. So once again, proving that, well, wait a second, if you know some Java and if you look at the vanilla code, you can get a long ways. So for this, we're going to have a public final animation state. We're going to call this the idle animation state. So for each of your animations, you want an animation state. This is a new animation state. In this case, we only need one because we're going to have the idle animation state play when we're idle, and we're going to have and the walking is then going to play any other time, basically. That's sort of the idea here. This is the idle animation timeout. Very important that this is set to 0, and those are the two things that we're going to need. And now it gets a little crazy. So for this, what we're going to need is we need to override the tick method. We're just going to do this all up here. So we're going to just get the tick method and we want to override this. And then we want to ask for if this.level.is client side. And we actually only want to call the next thing if we're on the client side. And we want to call a custom method that is the private void setup animation states. And we also want to override the update walk animation. That's actually quite important as well. So this one, I basically one-to-one, well, I mean, more or less copied over from the camel. You can also copy it over from there. This.get pose. Get pose. If pose is equal to pose.standing, then f is equal to a math.min v times a p partial tick times 6f. Otherwise, it's 1f. Else f is equal to 0. This.walk animation.update passing in f and passing in point to f. There you go. Once again, if we go into the camel, right, if I press shift twice and I search for the camel, we can actually see the update walk animations. This is the model. We of course want to go into the camel. There you go. And the update walk animations, you can see it's pretty much exactly the same thing. Dash animation we don't have, so that's basically why I just took this over here from the camel. So that is where basically this method comes from. And then the setup animations is as easy as saying, well, if the idle animation timeout is smaller or equal to 0, then I want to set the timeout equal to this.random.nextInt, and that's going to be a 40 plus 80. And then I want to say this.idle animation state.start with this.tick count, and else over here, and this is going to be minus this idle animation timeout. And there we go. And that's all we need for the setup animation states. This is then called inside of the if statement right here, setup animation states. And once again, if you look at the camel over here and you look at this, oh, what a shock. It is pretty much the exact same code because that is literally all we need to do here in this case. So yeah, it's really not that complicated. But for the animations, that's not quite it because, well, we don't have any animation definitions. It doesn't even know what to do here. But luckily, we have the text file that we have extracted. And you can see this is basically everything we're going to need. This is actually the actual code. So we can just copy this. This is the text file. If you remember that we've exported about half an hour ago from Blockbench over here for the animations. And we're just going to paste this in. At first, you're going to be greeted with a lot of errors. But if you import all the classes, you're going to be able to see this is the one from the client animations, animation definitions. All of a sudden, no more errors should be present and you should be pretty much good to go. And with this, we can then basically go into our model again and we can finish the animations because that's where everything else is. In the setup anim method, this is extremely, extremely important. We want to call this.root.getAllParts.forEach and then call model part : reset pose. If you don't do this, every time your animation plays, it's going to get added onto each other and horrible things will happen. Okay, so simply just don't do it. I'll also copy over one method over here. This is going to be available to you. This is the apply head rotation method. This is needed so that the head of your entity actually rotates towards the player when they're looking at it. And that is why we needed the head model part. That's why this is the case. And then we want to say this.apply head rotation, passing an entity right here. We can pass in the net head yaw, head pitch right here, and here the age in ticks. There you go. And then basically the Rhino entity here works as well. Totally fine. There you go. That should be fine. We don't actually need the entity in the apply head rotation method. And then we get to the animations. So we can say this.animate walk mod animation definitions.rhino walk limb swing, passing in the limb swing, passing in the limb swing amount. Max animation speed is 2 and then 0.25 over here. Once again, those numbers are basically taken from the camel. We then have this.animate and then passing in entity.idle animation state. Now we're actually going to get an issue because this is a T and not a Rhino. So we can just call cast Rhino entity and then entity.idle idle animation state.mod animation definitions.rhino_idle agent ticks, and then a speed of 1. And with that, the animations are set up and everything should be working. So this is quite a thing, but we're not like 100% done because I also want to add a spawn egg because, come on, let's add a spawn egg over here. That is really not that big of a deal. It basically just is a public static final registry object of type item. And that's going to be the rhino_spawn_egg equal to items.register. This is the rhino_spawn_egg. And then this is going to be a new forge spawn egg item mod entities.rhino. And I have already gotten the colors over here. There's 0x7e9680 and 0xc5d1c5. There you go. And that is not a dot, that should be a comma. And then after the last highlight color over here, new item.properties. And there we go. The Rhino spawn egg added as well. And to make sure that it is in the creative mode tab, we're going to add it here. So this is going to be the Rhino spawn egg. And then also kind of annoying once again for data gen, but sadly we actually this is the mod item model generator. I'm just going to copy this over because it's very straightforward. Basically, you can see we just want to get the with existing parent, passing this in, and then the existing parent is actually template spawn egg. That is going to make it so that the spawn egg has the, well, familiar colors that we're basically going to be adding here. And there we go. The spawn egg also added, and then we are basically good to go. Now, this was quite a journey, but now we should be pretty much good to go. We now have an entity with a custom animation, you know, looking cool, looking just pretty awesome. And, well, I mean, let's go into the game and see everything working. All right, so we found ourselves back in Minecraft, and first of all, I did forget to run the data gen, but you know that this is going to add the spawn egg over here. So and the spawn egg itself should work, so we can spawn on a rhino with that, and you can actually see there is an idle animation, there is a walking animation. Let's go! And this is also going to work for the babies as well, so they're also going to have an idle animation and a walking animation. Absolutely freaking fantastic. So that is basically the entirety of the Rhino done, and yeah, there you go. That is going to be a custom mob added to Minecraft with animations without any need of GeckoLib. So that is pretty freaking cool. As always, of course, all of the code and all of the different resources are available for download in the description below. We're going to continue with this entity, adding a cool attack animation in this video right here. Hope to see you there. So, yeah.